Welcome to another lore video, and it looks like every week at least one Galnet article will be a power play summary. While I'd prefer some other stories as well, we all would. This is a good move because, especially for the amount of new players we have, it gets them into Galnet, and a brief weekly report lets them see at a glance, in broad terms, what's going on with the powers. Not much else going on outside the Thargoid Wars, so hopefully power play will start generating stories that everyone can get involved in, and at least keep some of them neutral enough, perhaps through community goals or something, so that people can participate without pledging. There are many areas where I hope they have learned from the Thargoid War Machine, and this is one of them. We got very few stories for 2 years outside the war, which only a subset of the player base was into, and not much for anyone else. By the same token, not everyone is into power play, but unlike the war, which can only generate war stories, power play has a potential to generate all kinds of stories, involving everything there is to do in the game. So not making the most of the potential for storytelling with a full range of activities would be a missed opportunity. For now, I think they're doing a good job to get on top of exploits and balancing things and keeping players informed, which itself is a huge improvement from the War Machine, where months went by wondering if they were listening. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, they just weren't doing it. They weren't really looking at anything we were doing. They made decisions without trying to understand how we were working, and so it is good to see them doing a bit more than just, skim reading this time. However, while that's all a huge improvement over how they handled the War Machine, despite being helpful and informative, it can all still be a bit overwhelming. Any single part of it is easy enough to understand, but how everything interacts with everything else takes a while to get a feel for. Under the relatively simple and straightforward interface is a wide range of choices, so the complexity derives from what activities you employ in what system, at what time, with different activities having different levels of effect at different times, depending on the system type and what else is going on in there. From testing out power play by myself, I can empathise with those players who feel a little bit lost at this point, coupled with a nagging feeling that perhaps you're not being as productive as you could be. Your jobs for the week. You only have to do them for the first week when you sign up. That unlocks the ability to gain merits from then on, and gives you a brief introduction and walkthrough, before basically just leaving you to it. After that, the weekly jobs are optional, and some players aren't doing them at all. They're gaining merits by doing their preferred activities instead. So firstly, I would say stop putting pressure on yourself to be a robot who always knows what to do and always does it with total efficiency, because it's mad and it's counterproductive. You'll be so worried about what you're not doing that what you are doing will be compromised, and that will get you nowhere fast. Find something you can focus on, put in a good session, work steadily at it, and stop trying to be a machine. Otherwise, you will drive yourself crazy, you'll burn yourself out, and you'll talk yourself into giving up. Take it from someone who's already stuck out the war for 2 years, when many others have already come and gone. Pacing yourself is vital. All well and good, but what can you, as an individual or a member of a small group, actually do that has an effect on things? It's a very similar situation to when the war with the Titans started. Many of us who are either lone pilots or in a small squad wondered if one person or a small team could have any autonomy and make a difference by themselves, or whether we would be hanging on to the coattails of the big groups, with no free will and just following their directives. Fortunately, we found out that a targeted and focused effort by individuals and small groups could have an effect. Not as big as a large group, but then you wouldn't expect to. And eventually we all learned how to coordinate our efforts while still letting the specialist groups do their own thing for the best of all worlds. Finding out what you could do was easier. We were all fighting the same enemy, so there was a lot of help to be had. On the forum there's a war thread that's easy to find. It lays out everything we've done all along. Sites like DCOH are a handy at-a-glance reference to what needs doing and where. A couple of links can get anyone started. With power play it's harder because of all the different groups working for all the different powers, so there's no real common ground beyond guides on how best to do each activity. But they're also working in their own interests, so if you're not a part of that, you're out in the cold. You have to go to a lot more places to find out what's going on, and especially if you wanted to research all the powers before choosing one, you could spend days going through forums and discords and reddits and so on, just doing all of that, making it much more complicated for an individual or a small group to discover quickly where they might fit in. And with power play too, it's especially important that individuals and small groups do fit in and have an effect, because for one thing, there's a lot more people doing it than there were for the war, and for another, in power play 1, unless you were in a group, you could do nothing useful, and you could actually ruin all the hard work of a group by working somewhere they weren't. Power play 2 came with a promise of decentralisation, so everyone could make a contribution and work wherever they liked, and it's vital that it lives up to that promise, which it has achieved in that respect. But how to do that in the best way for you as a lone pilot or a small group is less clear. With that in mind, I want to thank one of our own squad members, Series 07. She's created a spreadsheet that gives you a quick summary of the activities for each power and each kind of system, and the link to it is below. Erelm from our allies at the Marauder Shadow Guard has done a similar thing, added stuff from other commanders and put it all into an extended document with the rank bonuses, and there's a link to that as well. Top job by both ladies and everyone else involved. I've mentioned seeking out the discords for each power, whether you follow their directives or take what they're doing as a guide to coordinate your own work with and just carry on doing the activities you prefer. In this one, I want to go through a couple of in-game tools which may help you with your decisions. Again, thanks to fellow squaddy Series 07 for her input on this. Been invaluable. So firstly, although you can go into any system and try and push it, you'll obviously do more if you add your contribution to where a lot of players are working already. And the easiest way to discover where they are, if you don't want to join groups and discords and troll through them for hours before you even start, is to use the activity filter. And that will give you a quick and simple way to find out where the biggest concentrations of players are. Secondly, whatever you do, it's never a bad idea to try and acquire another system. And it's not as hard as trying to undermine one, which is really difficult and more or less impossible on your own. Now that might be because of how easy it was to do by accident in Power Play 1, I don't know, but it is definitely very, very hard to do. So, acquisition systems are always good places to go. To see what's being built up and reinforced and where, use a Power Play map, select a fortified or stronghold system, select the strategic view button in the bottom right hand corner, and if there's an empty circle with a line connecting it to the fortified or stronghold, that's an acquisition system which is being directly reinforced by that fortified or stronghold. Acquisition activities can be used there to reinforce it until it becomes a fortified system itself and ultimately another stronghold. Remember, systems have no influence of their own until they become at least fortified. Building up acquisition systems is how you do that. This also works in reverse. If you select an empty or an exploited system and you press the strategic view button, you'll get lines out to any control system in range, and for empty systems, this will also include the possibilities for other powers to capture them. So, as you can see, strategic view gives you lots of useful information quite quickly. It might not be as straightforward as a war machine, but you're not completely directionless either. Mining has caused a bit of confusion, so I tested it. Obviously this depends on the system having something to mine, but if it has, you can use mining to build and reinforce systems and earn yourself some merits. Merits are based on the value of the sale. So if you're lucky to have a system with cores or platinum to mine, then they're the best. But laser mined commodities like painite, osmium, even gold and tritium, a decent 50,000 per tonne, even 100,000 per tonne depending on what it is and if you get lucky with the price. So if you're able to gather a lot of it quickly, that's decent money and merits. If you're pledged to Nakato Kane or as a Minotaur Val, your mining profits ramp up as you increase your rank, so you can use your mining to increase your rank, your profits and your merits, which in turn further raises your rank, and they feed into each other until eventually you'll get an extra 40 to 50% profit on everything you mine, which is a pretty powerful tool at your disposal. But even if you're not with a power giving out mining bonuses, it's worth doing if you can find a good mining spot. To apply mining, if you want to reinforce or undermine a system, no pun intended, mine and sell in the same system. For a stronghold or fortified system, you can either reinforce them, or you can reinforce any connected acquisition system. Use a strategy view, see what systems are connected, select a fortified or stronghold, and click on the strategy view in the bottom right hand corner. It will show you the stronghold or fortified system's circle of influence, with lines will be connecting them to any acquisition systems they're directly supporting. So you can either mine in the stronghold or fortified system and sell there to reinforce that one, or you can mine in the stronghold or fortified system and then sell in the connected acquisition system to reinforce that. Your choice. Any other hints and tips I pick up as I continue to explore the possibilities of power play, I'll put in a future video, and if you've got any hints and tips, feel free to put them in the comments. As for the war, although this stage is probably coming to an end and it seems unlikely they're going to throw more Titans at us, after Shojane warned us that they're planning something, Casio just took off and made a beeline for Sol, putting Sol into alert. I got a little video which played when I first logged in after the update, but it's not played since, so I put a link to it on Frontier's channel below. Doesn't really show a lot, just Casio upping sticks and heading away from the ammonia world we assume it's been using as a giant battery, and then some interceptors sent ahead of it into Sol, and that was followed by a message in game telling us that the Titans headed for Sol as well. At the moment, it's travelling in the space between star systems, just as the Titans first did when they came here 2 years ago, before we knew their name and called them Stargoids. So you can pick it up on the FSS, you can get within a star system of it, you can get hyperdicted by going near it, and to a point you can track it through the intrastellar space. But that's all. We have no way to intercept it, no way to stop it, and all we can do is wait and see if it parks in Sol or somewhere else. The other Titans, including Casio when it arrived, just plonked themselves down in whatever system they wanted and annihilated the system in the process, while making dozens of systems around them into controls before rapidly expanding. So how clearing this alert in Sol is going to stop that, I have no idea. But I accept that they're trying something different with the existing mechanics, and I can cut them a bit of slack, I can give them a bit of artistic license if clearing this alert in Sol somehow fends off Casio's attack, and if it takes the story somewhere interesting. Sol is only in alert right now, and rescues got underway immediately. Some going to the Cornwallis, which is still in V886 Centauri. Any from Daedalus go there, and the rest go to the Federation rescue ship in Gira. It was preceded by a couple of articles warning us that it's not over. The one where they read Shojine's mind also says she detected a change in the tone of the noise that she can hear, and when that happened last time it signified a change of intent. Aegis is criticised for not stopping her from having her mind invaded, but short of killing her, how did anyone expect them to? Denton portray us making silly statements about watching her closely, like that's going to do anything. The words locking, stable and bolted come to mind. But okay, does any of this paranoia about her have a point regardless? Is there any reason beyond pure paranoia for anyone to think she will be taken over somehow? Frankly, I have reasons to doubt this, along with the whole Thargoid-controlled zombie thing. I never thought that very likely anyway, to be honest. Too obvious. But then I thought the attack on Shinrata was also too obvious, so what do I know? Still, it seems more and more unlikely the longer it goes on and the more things like this happen. If Casio, or any other Titan, was going to unleash an army of Thargoid-controlled humans, why haven't they? Why wait this long? Why not do it while they still had a lot more of them? There's a lot less chance of them doing anything now they're mostly under our watch. Had they done it by now, they wouldn't even need any specific targets. Anywhere they got released and activated would have caused chaos and panic. We live in a world today where people lose their minds if their mobile coverage goes down for 2 minutes. Causing havoc isn't hard, and technology makes it easy. As for the people we've rescued, well, if they are sleeper agents, then perhaps a better word for them might be comatose. None of them have any implants reported, and again, outside pure paranoia, there's no evidence of any implanted telepathic triggers, even if anybody knew how to find a telepathic trigger. How do you find a telepathic trigger anyway? Does anybody know? As for Shojin, if she was going to get taken over, they could have done it when they invaded her mind. But in her words, they're done with me. For her to be left with such an emphatic impression must count for something, and when a narrative does things like this so declaratively, it could be a double bluff, but it's normally them saying this should be your takeaway from it, so I'm happy to accept that they are done with her. Similarly, if she was able to be taken over without being able to resist, you'd think that would have happened already too. It just feels to me like that ship sailed. I honestly cannot see what the Thargoids would possibly achieve by trying again. And the fact that they didn't try and take her over when they had the chance, but simply grabbed her knowledge and left, makes me think that they don't want to take us over at all, or control our minds, and never did. Articles then and since have confirmed that in practice they're far more likely to use her knowledge to identify important human targets. And to some, Sol might fit the bill there, but to everyone? Even to some kind of majority is a bit of a stretch. I mean, sure, the feds worship the place, but no one else does. It always amused me, by the way, that a trigger-happy, literal-minded citizenship still went for hippie ideas like Gaia, but there you go. Takes all sorts. By now, though, the majority of the bubble isn't from Sol. They've probably never seen Sol. And beyond knowing it's a world be expanded out from, they probably don't care too much. And why would they? 1100 years after the first colonists left, and since then humans have expanded to occupy 20,000 star systems in the bubble alone, plus Colonia and outposts in the black. In a society where we forget what was in the news last week, how much do people really think about that stuff outside history classes and documentaries? One reason might be that the Thargoids are still new to psychological warfare, and so their first forays into it are very crude and obvious. In which case, rather than laughing at how silly and naive they are by attacking Sol, perhaps we should worry about what will happen if they get better at it. Maybe we'll see the next few attacks coming as well, but sooner or later we might not. And then who's laughing? Okay, I'm going to finish this one with some speculation which goes right back to the Proteus wave. Why did the Titans come at all? It wasn't to get their own back on salvation, because as far as they knew, they'd already done that by blowing his ship to smithereens. It wasn't to get his backers in the superpowers either, because they largely invaded independent space, outside the superpower territory. So many people came to us, looking to use rescues to boost their Federation rank, unlock the Corvette. And like us, were disappointed to find out that 80% of the war zone was an independent space. We've been told repeatedly that the Thargoids neither know nor appear to care about our political and social structures, or our motivations and emotions, at least not until now. Not until their recent tete-a-tete with Shojin. So why then is them getting her knowledge suddenly so newsworthy, and why has it resulted in this dramatic change in tactics? It could have just as easily have been incomprehensible noise to them, meaningless static on the radio, but it wasn't. It meant something to them. It meant enough for them to put a plan together. Okay, at this point I'm putting in a sanity alert. Danger, incoming rabbit holes and tinfoil. Proceed at your own risk, abandon hope all ye who enter here, grab a strong coffee, and so on. You have been warned. Perhaps, after the Proteus wave, they decided it might be a good idea after all to find out more about us, beyond just our military strength and technological capability. For instance, they might like to know why did Salvation try and use one of their own sites to blow them up with. I mean, they're not alone in that. Warning bells went off in a lot of people's heads when we were told he was plugging a Guardian weapon into a Thargoid site to amplify the signal. What could possibly go wrong? I never understood how that could even work, did you? But it's what he did. So let's say it was the same for the Thargoids. Perhaps the Proteus wave event was so bizarre to them, so inexplicable, so baffling that anyone would even try something like that they decided they needed to know more about us. So they watched him while he worked, but what they learned about us wasn't enough. Possibly because his mind was stuck 200 years back in the past, but anyway, he then tried to kill them in HIP 22460, which is uninhabited, and even if it hadn't been, it is now. But they didn't use it as a beachhead. Tyrannus didn't park there, nor did any other Titan. Instead, they came further in, to occupied space, invaded occupied systems. They eventually stopped taking over uninhabited systems and focused on populated ones. And it's been hinted at more than once that they're looking for something. I think they found it. Ever since they first began attacking stations all those years ago, in 3303, we have tried to find a pattern to those attacks. Are they after certain economies, technologies, military centres, the home systems of anti-Xeno groups? But no pattern has ever been found, so we can say with any certainty, well, this is why they're attacking here, this is why they're attacking there. So what's left? Well, there's only one common factor in everywhere they've attacked so far. People. And this also fits in with their use of uninhabited systems. They've only ever used them as stepping stones to inhabited ones. If they just wanted uninhabited systems, if they just wanted territory, they could have taken as many as they wanted with almost no resistance, and always could have. By the time Professor Albert Esro from Aegis heard about the abductions increasing rapidly, they'd already been increasing for months. Let's say, for the sake of this tinfoil, they've been increasing since the Titans arrived, because that was the Titans' real purpose all along. They didn't come for our ships, or our technology, or our military. They got all that from the first wave of attacks leading up to the Proteus wave event. They didn't come for our economy. They didn't even come for revenge. They came for us. They came as a result of Salvation's actions, but not in retaliation for them. Instead, they came to gather as many people as possible in the hope of connecting to someone telepathically and learning about, well, for want of a better term, our mindset. Not simply what we do, but the psychology behind it. What made Salvation do what he did? The Titans were brought here specifically to store people. And all that stuff with invading systems was to keep them all warlike amongst us occupied while they found out what they wanted to know. Namely, why we do what we do. They tried to connect to the people they captured, to find a mind they could communicate with, but maybe only certain people are in tune enough for a connection. On their wavelength, so to speak. Perhaps only one in several billion people has the right sort of mind, and that's why they had to take so many of them. Prepared to risk every Titan to get just one human they could talk to, which is why they've sat there and let us knock them over like dominoes instead of retreating as soon as we got a weapon that could kill them. But none of the people they abducted could give them the connection they wanted, and which they finally got from Shojin. Now, what they might have done, if we'd destroyed all the Titans before they got what they wanted, who knows? Send another 8? Well, sure, why not? Losses don't seem to mean anything to them. The timing of her announcement, just as we're getting to the end of these Titans, could be seen to suggest that the information they got from her was what they were after all along. And eventually, after 2 years, almost 2 years, of fighting and capturing us, they discover her, and they get a knowledge of humanity from her mind. She describes it as being scraped out of her head, which is pretty creepy and disturbing. Along with size, ripping people out of rescue ships, it's another clue that the Thargoids really don't do subtle. If you asked them to come in and wipe their feet, they'd probably kick the walls down. It might not even be to do with a chip in her head either. Not as such. But more to do with her having the right sort of mind to begin with. Maybe one in several billion. A mind which allows her to survive the chip when nobody else did, and then tune into Radio Thargoid. Or maybe the chip is needed for communication. It could work either way. The lore describes Thargoids as biomechanical, and that does imply a cyborg-style fusion of creature and machine. So another possibility is that despite being telepathic, they need a machine interface as a channel for it, like the telepaths and the shadow ships in Babylon 5. If it is to do with a chip in her head, that could also explain how Azimuth made a chip that connected to the Thargoid hive mind in the first place through the scout ships that Inra gave them to experiment with by reverse engineering it from whatever device the Thargoids used for the same thing. And just like our frameshift drives, which as we all know were also reverse engineered from Thargoid technology, perhaps the chips Azimuth made could be a more crude and simple version of the devices that the Thargoids used to plug in. But none of the abductees that were rescued have any implants as far as we know. And perhaps for whatever reason the Thargoids didn't want to implant them. And even if they've realised now that they do need a chip to connect to us, it doesn't matter anymore because they've already got what they came for. Which again would seem to go against the idea that they're going to turn people into sleeper agents or zombies, and the idea was always to talk and to learn, not to control. But we'll see. Whether a chip is needed or not is academic, you know. What is interesting is that all the abductees were restored to full physical health. Now remember, they were taken from all kinds of ports, from alerted, heavily damaged, on fire, under attack, and yet not one of them had a burn, a broken bone, a bruise, or any kind of injury when we got them back from the Titans. Now okay, that could be because they planned to convert them later and wanted them in peak physical condition. It might be they planted a telepathic signal in them that didn't need technology implanting first. Or, rather than desperately trying to find a black cat in a dark room that may not be there at all, for no other reason than our own paranoia, it could also just as easily be that they never meant to harm them in the first place. As for taking revenge on Azimuth and Salvation, as many people think they could, yeah, that might be. But as Jackson and Braben said in that interview on Epic, why assume they have any emotional responses we can understand? Why indeed. Our capacity for revenge comes from fear. And again, from the interview, most likely they don't know fear. So if they don't fear being attacked, and they don't fear pain, and they don't fear the consequences of leaving someone alive who's hurt you once and may hurt you or someone else again, there is no motive for revenge. So revenge makes no sense as a motive. Recognising the need for some kind of punishment, that's a possibility. But perhaps only in the detached and impersonal way that a key locks a cell door, or a bullet or injection puts down a dangerous animal. Or taking out targets because they make weapons like the Proteus Wave and a nanite torpedo. That could just be a smart military move, no fear or desire involved, just a logical military target. It also doesn't necessarily follow that if the Thargoids now know we have a concept of revenge, that they now have one too. There are many other possibilities. They may only understand the facts in our minds, not the emotions. So when it comes to attacking important human targets, they only need to know that they are important, not all the hows and whys. Or they may understand the emotions as well, but they don't share them. Or they may even see such emotions as primitive ones they outgrew millennia ago. Whatever the case, I have had the nagging feeling ever since the Titans came that the whole war with them was a smokescreen for something else. If not the abductions, once we found out about those ramping up, then something. And all the invasions and taking out the systems around the Titans is a massive distraction, knowing that by the time we do them all, it won't matter, because then they'll have got what they were after, and that, coupled with them having no fear, is why they're just letting us finish off the Titan that remains, because it's served its purpose, and it's now as expendable as an interceptor. Even if this last one appears to be conducting a few experimental attacks, it's only postponing its downfall when we catch up to it. Unless it's planning to stay in space between star systems, but that would be cheating. If they do understand our psychology and start using psychological warfare, they will have the upper hand. Not because they're experts, not even because they have the potential to become experts, but because we can't do it back. Because nothing we do scares them. So there you have it. My tinfoil. The war with the Titans was a massive exercise in smoke and mirrors, which is why it's felt like a big test all along. But since they must have already tested our military strength and technology with their previous attacks, the Titans came for us this time to find out how our minds work, and now they have a better idea about that, we'll see what they do next. It's an explanation. It fits what we've observed and what we've been told. It possibly clears up a few things that would otherwise appear contradictory, but is it true? Beats me. I just work here. Stay safe, and thanks for watching.